the executive committee meeting, and it's good to see all of you. Happy New Year. I think last time we met was in the December meeting, and quite a lot has happened since then. So I'm happy to share with you, as part of agenda item number 4 today, some of our vision and expectations. But before we do that, today we have some consent agenda items. And then there's a lot of work that's happened with the Workforce Readiness Committee, and they have an annual report that they wanted to share with us. So we'll be reviewing that. And then Todd and Aliyah are going to be presenting our WTDB membership documents, particularly the roles and responsibilities and our bylaws. And one of the interesting parts of that conversation is going to be the high performing workforce board. And then I'll follow up with where we've been since the December meeting. I'd put together some expectations that I shared with Sarah Means, and I'm happy to report on some of those. And then Julia has a presentation on WIOA and Workforce L. So this was the presentation that she wanted to give at the December board meeting, but we had quite a few technical glitches. So she'll be talking about that later this afternoon. So with that, we can get started. And so since we're not at quorum yet, Todd, you were suggesting item number 2, that also requires an action item, right? So should we go to 3 then?
I think we're good to stay with 2, and if for some reason we don't get to quorum Venkat, we can bring it back around. Just I know that the folks that are here to present on the final report for the Work Readiness Committee have some competing priorities, so I think we're kind of lucky to have them. So let's just let them go forth.
Okay, and Charlie, you're leading the conversation here?
Yes, thanks, Venkat.
Okay, go ahead.
Great. Well, we'll start. Well, first of all, thank you, everybody. When you talk about competing agenda items, I feel a little guilty because I'm down in Cabo, and for any of you who don't know, so the ocean continues to call. So I'll see if I can get on with this. What I really wanted to do was really just kind of tee up the great work that has occurred in this particular report. I'm personally very, very proud of this particular report. We decided to try to start off this process by keeping it rather truncated so that it was easy to read and we could distribute and so forth, but with multiple members' contributions and so forth, it's really turned into what I feel is going to be a very important document. And I think it's quite frankly going to align very, very well with some of the direction that Venkat has already disseminated to the Workforce Talent Development Board. But before I go, let me just on a personal level, first of all, I really want to thank Todd. This executive committee and the Workforce Talent Development Board, we are very lucky to have a guy who is a connector, a collaborator. He's a sounding board, he's open, he's positive. And I do not believe that without him and my ability to be able to connect with him and him being able to assist in those other processes, that we would have been able to move this work as far forward as we actually have. So I really wanted to, first of all, just thank Todd. Thank you for your leadership and your continued leadership in the WTDB as well as the subcommittee work. The other one I really want to highlight is Sherry Clark. There is in no way that I can take any praise or anything for the work that you're going to be receiving, both within this report, but also in the document and the process with both OES as well as now it's collaborative efforts with other key strategies that we're looking at. I mean, she's an architect, she's thoughtful, she's networked, she's a collaborator, she has ceaseless passion and commitment to the work that we're doing. And in fact, I think we're getting the greatest bargain of all with the funding that we've gotten because Sherry just never stops. So I wanted to thank Sherry. Also from ODE and so forth, the tremendous support that we received both in funding and so forth. ODE, you have kept this alive, quite frankly. And without the work that Maggie has done with Susan and others, and there are countless others, by the way, that have contributed to this effort. And I really want to thank all of them for their their process to date, and my hope is that we're going to see greater things moving in the future. And to my co-chair, Tom Goodhue, who, you know, as I look back to the fifth year ago and the initial conversations of where is this going to go, I kept trying to define things, and they kept saying I was crazy, and I think it's actually happening. So I'm glad my definition is working versus the crazy side. But Tom, you have been a collaborator, a deep connector to the world of CTE as well. And your efforts and my thanks, I hope, go to you as a co-chair. And then in general, for the WTDB to really truly understand, this is an incredible and has been an incredible collaborative effort. I remain enthused and delighted to see the numbers of people that continue to show up for our meetings with enthusiasm, with commitment, with great ideas that are being thrown in, whether it be our overall arching strategy or whether it be one of the specific pieces of work that's being done. This group is action oriented. And again, thanks to Todd and the WTDB to actually form this committee to say, it's time we do something. And I think it is time that we do something. So my request to the executive committee today is, number one, adopt this report. Obviously, that's why we're here, and I think the great work that's been outlined and so forth. But the other side is, this is a process that you should be using the report once it is complete. You should be distributing this report once it is complete, and you should lobby with this report once it is complete, because those actions are what this is all about. We still have a lot that needs to be done. Oregon's future, I believe, resides within the pages of this particular highlighted report. And so at that point, what I'd like to do is another special thanks to Beth Wiggum, who worked with Sherry in actually constructing a lot of what you're seeing within this report and so forth. Beth, special thanks to you as well for just volunteering, picking it up and running with Sherry, and it's been delightful to work with you. So I'll turn it over to Sherry and Beth.
Thank you. Charlie, I just want to echo what you said. It's such a collaborative effort, and so I really appreciate everyone as well. And we do have a report for the board today and guests, and I am Sherry Clark. I do define myself as kind of the chief architect of Oregon employability skills, and then I do work part-time for the Oregon Department of Education, working on their Career Connected Learning initiative. Our overarching objective is a bold one. It's to move Oregon into the top 10 states for workforce quality. We believe that this path can be achieved by building integrated partnerships across education, industry, our local workforce boards, and community sectors. And with that, I'd like to ask Beth if she would give an introduction to her work.
Thanks, Sherry. And thank you, Charlie, for your kind words. Good afternoon, members of the board. For the record, my name is Dr. Beth Wiggum. I do work at the Oregon Department of Education. My position supports career and college readiness, as well as school counseling programs across the state. So both areas are very much systems work and very connected to a lot of different moving parts around the state. So just very privileged to have the opportunity to be a part of this work. So thank you for having us here. I'll hand it back over to Sherry to kick us off.
All right, so the next slide, Aaliyah. So the workforce has reached a strategic turning point with our Workforce Readiness Committee. We have moved beyond traditional boundaries to embracing a larger workforce system approach. This is about more than just cooperation, it's integration. We want to integrate these things together. We are bridging the gap between K-12 and the workforce by intentionally disrupting outdated siloed models. Again, by building active partnerships from education all the way into industry with our workforce board, community sectors, we can move this project along, and we can also bring a lot more clarity and expanded opportunities for Oregon's future talent. Next slide. To operationalize this vision, we focus on 4 core career-connected learning initiatives. First one being Oregon employability skills, where we focus on essential human skills. STEM Lift, we really want to look at modernizing technical literacy, dual credit and early college, ensuring college level access for all, and CTE for all, seeing CTE as a foundational place to start with our work readiness work. Next slide. So I'm going to cover all 4 of these briefly. In Oregon employability skills this year, we saw that Senate Bill 3 helped us to look at this as a graduation requirement. And I'm going to let Beth talk on that in just a moment. So I'm going to move on. That our focus was on intentional instruction of human skills, things like communications, self-awareness, and resiliency. And in this year, one of the things we moved from is we had free and open access curriculum already, but now we are really digging in with our industry partners to our skills one-pagers, and we added the workforce toolkit, where we are expanding that work throughout 2026. We do believe that's where we'll be doing a majority of our work. I'm going to turn it over to Beth to talk about the Oregon Senate Bill 3 standards.
Great. All right. So you just heard Sherry mention about Senate Bill 3, which, can you hear me okay? Perfect. Okay. So Senate Bill 3 passed in the 2023 legislative session. So this policy created the foundation that requires every high school student in Oregon to take a course for graduation that addresses employability skills. So I was really excited to see this come through the legislation. And then I was tasked as leading the work out of ODE to then operationalize and then implement Senate Bill 3 with our districts across the state. So through my work on the Workforce Readiness Committee, my work with leading Senate Bill 3 at ODE, we were able to really intentionally create or embed the Oregon employability skills within the standards. So as the standards were being developed, we were able to call out the employability skills within there. And then it's also throughout the entire course. So throughout the entire course has been the employability skills are embedded. So not just within the standard. So we'll show, I want to put in the chat, if that's okay, where you can look at this while I'm kind of talking, but this is the actual standard that you'll be able to see. So the specific standard where Oregon employability skills has been embedded is in the high school, so HS, higher education career path skills, so HECPS, and then it's B1. And so in that particular standard, I put it in the chat so for you can see if you scroll down to that particular standard, you'll be able to see that the standard requires students to practice the employability skills. And those are the Oregon employability skills. And these are the skills, as part of the standard, we said self-manage and collaborate with others in workplace settings. And this isn't really just a future goal. It's a mandate that's starting with the class of 2027. So our seniors next school year will be required to meet the standards and all have the employability skills. And if you go to the next slide, to really be able to actualize and make the standard actionable, what we did was we included key concepts where the specific the 10 employability skills live. And so all of these, the expectation is the teacher will cover all of these standards and that the students will learn and be able to practice these within the classroom. Also, when the teachers are partnering with business and industry or bringing them in, they can either get those skills, those practice within the classroom or outside of the classroom, and that will meet the requirement for that standard. So you can see that those standards and key concepts, they range in what's expected that the student will demonstrate and be able to do. And so we also placed a heavy emphasis on, as Sherry mentioned earlier, the human skills. So like the empathy, the social awareness, diversity. And then we know that those are critical for practicing cultural competency in today's workforce and being able to get along and work well with others. So what you'll note in the key concepts under each of the different employability skills, there's a little asterisk next to additional specific skill sets and knowledge and skill sets. Those are actually our career technical education knowledge and skill statements. So what we see is very clear alignment. And so we're trying to help educators in the classroom understand that alignment to whether they're in a CTE classroom, whether they're in any other classroom, they'll be able to see those connection points and the employability skills. So those are in there. And I will turn it back over to Sherry. Take us into the next section.
Okay, can you advance to the next slide? Yeah. Yeah, there you go. I was going to say this one wasn't showing, I don't think, when Beth was speaking. And so you can always take another look at it later because it should be in the agenda and things that Aaliyah put out there. But that was what Beth was talking about. So let's advance to the next slide. And I'm going to mention our other, we have, remember, get 4 initiatives. So the second initiative is the STEM Lift initiative. And this is one where we looked at the fact that we really need to address the proficiency crisis that we have in Oregon, with fewer than half of our students meeting benchmarks in math and science. I guess I got to slow down here. And we believe that we can do some of that work leveraging some reasoning AI platforms like Conmigo to really help some of our 4th to 8th graders to really modernize their access to this high quality instruction. And we want to do this together so that when we're building on these systems that we're building across the 4 initiatives. So we'll go on to the next one. I'm going to turn it back to Beth.
Sure. The next initiative we wanted to highlight in the report is the dual credit in early college. So as we move into this part of the report, there is a newly developed vision around dual credit. And so what this tried to do is establish a statewide expectation that every single high school student has access to at least one college level course at no cost to them. How great is that? So this isn't just a top-down goal. This vision really was helped shaped by over 600 survey responses from educators and partners across 33 different counties. And so a lot of that feedback was written in to help shape what that vision is. And so the feedback was really loud and clear that students need credits that are not only transferable across the college university level, but also that are deeply aligned with purposeful career pathways that lead to high wage, high demand jobs. So we were able to get that out of this initiative. And so just really proud of that work. The other initiative that we'd like to highlight is the Career and Technical Education for All. And within this initiative, we know that CTE is a very strong starting point, a lever for a lot of our students to be able to start to build those work readiness skills. So this is a really great place where Oregon employability skills are embedded within, also STEM initiatives and dual credit programs. Also, they all converge in with career technical education to really create that seamless experience for our students while they're still in high school within the K-12 system. So one of the successes that we wanted to highlight within the CTE section of the report is the work of our Career Connected Learning Systems navigators. And those were placed at the community colleges around the state. And so they have really worked to expand reach and have fostered over 3,900 regional partnerships this year. Also, they had dedicated outreach where they've been able to engage probably just over 18,500 students statewide during the 2025 year. So just really getting that systems work and connections out there to really be able to move and drive the work forward. So I'll hand it over to Sherry for the next part.
Thank you. So what we're coming to here is our report really highlighted some critical challenges and some policy shifts that we wanted to just bring forward for folks to consider. One is that Oregon still lacks a unified system to track learner progress from K-12 and then all the way through their employment. We do believe that we need some braided funding to help us sustain this work, and that one of the ways that we could use some of that braided funding is really just to bring some sort of coordinator together to help facilitate and move this work so that we can continue to work across systems through that facilitation. We'll go on to the next slide. And I'll turn that over to Beth.
Yeah, and I will just bring us home with the message that Oregon cannot afford incremental and siloed progress. Just through the initiatives, what you've heard in the work through our committee and this board, we know that the path forward requires a synchronized learner-centered talent ecosystem that is world-class ready. And so we believe that together we can get there and that we will get there. So Sherry and I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for letting us share and be a part of this work with you all. And we're happy to answer questions that you might have and anything else that's come up for you. We'd love to hear.
Yeah, on the next slide, we do have our email addresses on there. And there is a QR code to the full report. I believe all of you have it. But I thought maybe if you're going back and looking at this, it might be nice to have it on there. And then Oregon Employability Skills website is also QR coded on here for you. So with that, any questions?
Thank you, Sherry and Beth. I see, Todd, you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to weigh in and echo what Charlie's already said and just, express my gratitude to both Sherry and to Beth. They worked tirelessly on this report. The passion they have for the work is, I think, honestly unsurpassed. So just thank you both very, very much. This could not gotten across the finish line without the two of you. That said, I also want to say a big thank you to Aaliyah. Aaliyah really came into the fold and got the report into its final form very quickly and did a lot of work, captured wordsmithing in many sessions. And so a big thank you to Aaliyah as well.
Thank you, Todd. And thank you, Sherry and Beth and Charlie. I really think the report touches on some of the important points that we've been talking ad nauseum for a really long time. So the human skills that you mentioned, the Oregon employability skills, I'm often asked, in this age of technological advancements, what are the most important skills that employers look for? And at least from the perspective of the technology industry, always hone in on the 3 C's. And those 3 C's are curiosity and critical thinking and contextual problem solving. And so having these human skills as part of that is excellent. Dr. Bennings, I see your hand up.
Okay. Yeah, sorry I came in late. I was leaving the cabinet meeting to come here. But I wanted to say what I saw in the presentation was amazing. And I just also want to amplify one of the pieces that was at the end of the presentation around the fragmented data, like being able to track from K-12 to employment. That has been, as long as I've been in higher education and as long as I've been in Oregon, now almost 4 years, that has been an elevated need. And I hope that, from this report, it starts to prompt some conversations and some tangible actions around, okay, if workforce is a problem and we're trying to solve workforce issues and gaps and plan for the future, we can't do that without that type of data. And so hopefully we can, I don't know, get some momentum behind that. But I'd love to be a part of that if we can, as the WTDB, be a partner in that work, if we can make it happen.
Thank you, Dr. Bennings. Charlie?
Yeah, I would just reinforce, thanks, Dr. Bennings, because I think that's one of the things from industry and so forth. I continue to hear people saying, well, if you can show me the facts, then I will support you. And the difficulty is that our system is unable to show us the facts unless we take action. And so, boy, in some small way, if this report starts to get that ball rolling down, which I think it has already, then I think we are in for some treats as far as being able to bring some real solid objective evidence to these conversations about how is the method working, where is it working, how is it being applied and accepted in the workforce.
Any other questions for Charlie, Beth, or Sherry? Okay. One follow-up question for you, Aaliyah. I know that there were some edits that Anne Mercero had sent. I just wanted to make sure those were incorporated into the report before we vote.
They have been. All of Anne's comments have been incorporated.
Okay, very good. Okay, so with that, I think what we should do.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Andrew.
I had a question. Sorry, Emma had up. You might not have seen it. Hi, everyone. Andrew Stolpe, OED Director. Question about the Education Workforce Talent Director position. And if you maybe talk more about that, and if you considered if that's kind of if that's more of an area of focus, or it has to be a new position. And what I mean by that is that just something, you know, the relevant agencies and entities could agree to focus on, and we can task, you know, some individuals who are currently in place in an agency to focus on, or if it has to be a new position.
Well, I'll share kind of what we've discussed in our group, and that is that this position, and I don't know, director might be like a bigger term than we need to have here, but it's really a facilitator, someone that can help facilitate this work. There are lots and lots of examples that I won't go into today, but I could give them if anyone wanted some. But there are examples of where our return on investment, grant processes, all these kinds of things can be better when we work across agencies. So if we're creating something for, let's say, high school, and we're creating something for young workers who are out of school, if we can do that work together, we can get further on a much smaller amount of money. But there needs to be someone who can help make those connections happen and make those facilitations happen between the local workforce boards and education and industry and our community-based partners, and bringing all of that work together. So it's really, I think, much more a facilitator role of making sure that the communication's going across those different agencies. And it seems like it could work really well as a braided funding position, because it really is going to impact and help build that synergy between all of the organizations. How we get there, I'm not really sure, but we do believe that it's a critical role for our state as we move forward. Charlie, did you want to add to that?
No, I don't think so, Sherry. I think you covered it well. I think the key word here is its intentionality. Simply launching an effort without the intent of sustaining it, I think, is something that we have to change. And I think that's what kind of starts to break down those silos, as well as perhaps address some of the funding models that are out there. But I think that intentional collaboration, it's not difficult for people to get siloed. And so I think the intentionality here is to kind of just keep tearing down those walls through conversation.
I do want to add one other thing to that. So as I was working on Oregon employability skills over the past 4 years, I find myself sometimes working really strongly on like the K-12 curriculum. Then the next thing, you know, I'm being pulled by a community partner that really needs some help in how they implement this in after-school programs and extended programming. And then the next week, I'm working with local workforce boards on things that they need. And then I'm working with industry partners. And it becomes difficult because my funding that I have through ODE is really K-12 funding. And so it makes it difficult to know, you know, what's fair and how, you know, all the things I'm doing in OES is really helping to advance K-12. So they've been very good about it, but I do feel that it also adds the voice so when people from local workforce boards come and ask me to do things, and they feel a little standoffish too, like, well, can we really ask her to do that? Because of the way that the funding is set up. So having someone in the middle who's funded to be able to work across those systems is why I think it's really important, because what it does is it elevates the voice of all the partners and helps move the project, I think, along in a little more equitable way.
I'd add too, Andrew, I think you had a really great question. And working at ODE for 10 years, I've been on quite a few different initiatives. And what I see is really great intention from different agencies, organizations that come together. They have, staff assigned to do a part of the work because maybe there's a connection to their work. However, what we're finding is that there's no one really holding the work to like continue. And so like as there's turnover, as like things change, different priorities from different agencies, organizations, as that changes, then the people change and then the work then doesn't necessarily continue. So I've experienced that as part of career connected learning, helping develop that framework, then switch to having to then, develop the framework for transformative emotional learning and then Senate Bill 3. So as things shift and priorities shift, then people also too. So I think from what came from the Workforce Readiness Committee was this role that would be key to being consistent across and being able to carry the work and coordinate that and facilitate that. So yes, I hope that answers a bit of what came from that.
Thank you, Beth. Todd?
Oh, thanks, Venkat. I thought I saw Josh Hall raise his hand. Maybe I was wrong, but I just wanted to make sure, Josh, you had the opportunity to weigh in if you wanted to.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I had raised my hand before the vote, so I don't necessarily have anything for this particular conversation, but I did want to understand when we do the vote, what exactly we're voting on. What does our vote from this body mean? Because my vote could change depending on what that is. While I appreciate all the work here and I like everything that's been done, there are a couple of things within this report that I do have some concerns over. So that's what why I had raised my hand, is I wanted to understand that a little bit better before I voted.
Yeah, I think Venkat, if I might, I could just jump in and Josh, I think it's typical protocol for the WTDB that's existed for a few years now. We wanted to push this forward with an action item at the December meeting, but unfortunately we sort of took a poll of all of us folks that had rolled up our sleeves and tried to work on the report, and given the holiday, we really wanted the report to come out in its best form, and we didn't feel like and think that we could get it done in time for the December board meeting. So we decided, with Charlie and Tom's leadership and approval, to sort of move it to this meeting, because as many of you know, it is in the bylaws that the executive committee can act on behalf of the WTDB. So there's that piece, Josh, as to why it came to the exec and not the full board. I think the other piece is that protocol piece where when we do a report like this, the approval means that it will be forwarded to the governor's office, legislative leadership, and the executive branch of state government. So appreciate you being here today, Andrew, and hearing the presentation. You'll obviously be getting a copy of it. And then it'll go broadly out to the WTDB and other partners as well. So that's sort of what we're voting on today, Josh, is approval of the content and then also to distribute it.
Are you good with that, Josh?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is like we're not actually saying, to the legislators, like this is something that we're fully supporting or whatever, even though I think mostly we do support it. We're just saying that, hey, this has been completed. We've reviewed it. We've approved the review, and here it is for everybody else to take a look at and move forward on.
Yeah, I think that's right, Josh. We were very intentional as writers and editors and reviewers to make sure that we had softer language and not saying sort of thou shalt. We had Julia review it for language as well, amongst many others. So yeah, I think it's sort of findings and things to consider if we're thinking about the legislature, not solid, strong opinions and recommendations. Does that help, Josh?
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Okay. Todd, should we proceed towards a vote then?
Looks like Andrew has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, apologies. Don't want to delay towards vote. But I had a similar question about what the vote was, so I appreciate that. Appreciate the answer to my prior question as well. Just one more question. It was called out towards the beginning of the report about the new Prosperity Council. Just would be curious to hear thoughts about how the folks see this work fitting into that, or whether we need to wait and see how the prosperity, because they've got a pretty big charge and a pretty tight timetable over the next few months to do their work, and whether we should be wait to see how that unfolds, or use this as a piece to share with them for their consideration. Just kind of what folks think about that.
And if that's okay, Todd, I'll take a quick crack at this. So Andrew, based on our meeting with Sarah, and I'm going to get to that later in our agenda today, because I put forth some vision and expectations for the board, given that I'm stepping into this role as chair. And one of there were three prongs to that, and one was the WTDB being a unified convener of all the workforce priorities that are going on within the state. And the Prosperity Council was yet another silo that we had mentioned. And so I wanted to understand the role of the Prosperity Council and how we interact with them. And Sarah did mention, I'm not sure if she's on the call today, but she did mention that it is a very tight timeline for 6 months or so, but there are going to be workforce driven agenda items where she fully expects that our board will be involved. So that's a 2-line summary, but I'll go into a little bit more detail later. Okay, so with that, then I should ask for a motion to approve the Workforce Readiness Committee's annual report. Do I have a motion?
I would so move. I'll second.
Okay. Aaliyah, did you get okay. What was it? Ken was the motion, and who was the second?
Yeah.
Okay. And who was the second?
I think I was second. I don't care. You can put me in the slot. You can trade me back and forth too. So.
Well, for the record, it's a motion from Ken and a second from Anne.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and also thank you for reviewing the report and suggesting the last minute edits.
You bet.
Okay, and so anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, I'm assuming that since there was a motion and there was a second, then everybody says yes. So we'll go ahead and mark that taken care of. And I'd just like to, while we're on this topic of voting, go back to number 1, agenda item number 1. So I should ask Aaliyah if there were any public comments.
There are no public comments.
Okay, in which case we should ask for a motion to review and approve the committee minutes from November 19th of last year.
I move.
Okay.
I'll second. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay. And Ken second. Okay. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you for getting these out of the way. And then we'll move to agenda item number 3. And we're right on time. So that's for Aaliyah and Todd, whoever is leading the conversation.
That
Todd,
would be me.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Aaliyah.
Sorry to interrupt, Aaliyah,
go ahead.
but just time check, Venkat. I just want to make sure that we have enough space on the agenda time-wise for the next topic, which you're going to be leading, and any discussion that might follow. So Aaliyah and I have tried to maybe truncate what we had sort of prepared and keep it pretty brief so that we allow enough time. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Todd.
Absolutely.
I was looking at that number 140. I thought we were right on time, but that was the end of the talk. So, okay, we're behind. Go ahead, Elia.
I tend to be a fast talker anyway, so I'm sure I can get this done in under the amount of time allotted. But good afternoon, everyone. You may notice that I am on the agenda today. Todd and I have been working on professional development and creating opportunities for me to engage in more leadership roles. So today is kind of part of that effort, and I'm excited to walk you through some important updates. We're going to start on our website because I want to make sure that this website is something that you are familiar with. So instead of just pulling up the documents in the ether, we're going to go and get them ourselves so that we know how to get there. We're going to start on our homepage, right? So homepage of our website, take us over to our About Us section and our About Us homepage. So all of these documents are available on our WTDB About Us homepage. Today, we're going to review two key documents that I have revised for accessibility, one of them being our roles and responsibilities, the second being our WTDB bylaws. And I'm going to remind you how to find them and where they live on our website, as well as the updates that were made. So if we start on our homepage, make it over to our About Us page, there's a great landing page right up here at the top where we can find almost all of our resources at the drop of a hat. If you want a deeper dive into all the cool things the WTDB has to offer, all of our supporting documents, everything lives in our board resources accordion. But today we're going to kind of focus up here at the top and click on our WTDB roles and responsibilities, which is weirdly not the one that I thought I was showing you. Pause for dramatic effect. This one. So our roles and responsibilities document has been updated for accessibility with a clickable table, and it has been improved for readability. Everything within our roles and responsibilities remains the same, but it's a little more easy to read, little easier flow, and anything you need, you can just click on. So if you want to see the policy and guidance section, click on it. It'll take you directly to that page. Just wanted to familiarize you guys with this. We don't see this document very often. So if you want to take a quick look at what our 7 roles and responsibilities are, now is a good time to review that. But again, lives on the website. You can take a full gander later, but it has been updated so that it should be a little easier to read. The next document, yes.
Real quick, because I'm following you on the website. You clicked roles and responsibilities on the website and got this document that you pulled up?
So if you scroll down, I noticed a mistake I made.
Okay.
I was hoping no one else picked up on it. But good, thank you. The first piece, I don't know what happened to that link. Scroll down to the board resources accordion. Next time you check, it won't look like that anymore. Next time you check, my mistake will have magically disappeared. But yes, it's there and it will be under roles and responsibilities. The next one I wanted to show you guys that I updated for accessibility is our board bylaws. And boy, that was a beast of a document and it needed some remediation to make it a little bit more accessible. And so I don't know why it started me at the page 4. Ooh. Our bylaws were updated in a similar vein as our roles and responsibilities. So clickable links. You are going to be able to see a full overview of what those bylaw sections look like without having to scroll through the whole document. So we have our table of contents, our different articles, and the sections within each of those. Again, 12-page document, not going to scroll through the whole thing, but as we have this up, I did want to quickly touch on a few points that are within our bylaws that sometimes we could use some reminders on. One of them being attendance. So in our bylaws, it talks about how regular attendance is really important because it impacts quorum and whether or not we can conduct business. So starting in 2026, one of the things that we're going to start recording in our minutes is excused absences. That way it's transparent. and we know who has been able to make that prior contact. Now, if you can't attend, that's totally fine. Just let Todd or I know. We ask for notice because it helps us plan and ensures we meet quorum requirements. Also, public notice for meetings is required at least 48 hours in advance. So we ask for some of that same requirement. So quick takeaway, please RSVP either way, whether you're attending or not attending. More information is better than less, for me at least. But beyond meetings, the bylaws outline a few other really important points, specifically what our membership looks like, which includes the governor, governor's designee, legislators, a majority of board representatives, workforce representatives, local officials, and state leaders. One of the questions we get a lot is whether or not we can allow proxy voting. And according to our bylaws, when it comes to voting, email isn't allowed, neither is proxy voting. Members must be present unless you are the governor's designee. And remember, to conduct business in a meeting like this, whether it's the executive committee or the full board meeting, we need a quorum, which is 50% of business members and a majority of all members. So for an executive committee, that would be 50%. And if we ever want to change those bylaws, it just takes a 2/3 vote and someone to bring that motion to the table. We have covered a lot in a very short period of time. Our roles, our responsibilities, our foundation, and the framework that defines the high performance workforce. And I wanted to touch on, later Venkat's going to talk to us a little bit more about vision and expectations for the WTDB in 2026 and his outlook for the future. Before we do that, I did want to invite Todd to share a few words about the high performing workforce board framework, which is a key document in a lot of what the board does. And I wanted to show you where that lives in case it's something you'd like to reference for the future. And that is just down here in, oh, you get to watch me struggle. Woo-hoo! All right, well, it was the last try. Apologies for watching that embarrassing moment. Our high-performing workforce board standards here as they are loading. I'll go ahead and invite Todd to take this piece away as he is much more knowledgeable than I am.
Thank you so much, Aaliyah. Great job with the overview there of the bylaws and the roles and responsibilities. We just wanted to raise this back up again. Many of you that have been on the board for a while have heard us reference this many times. It was a framework that was developed by the National Governors Association in concert with a number of best practice states around the country in terms of the opportunity to leverage existing state workforce boards. Back in the day, they were primarily, if not exclusively, focused on the public workforce system, which in our state is WorkSource Oregon. After many strategic conversations, as I said, across the country, the question was asked, particularly by the business community, why don't we leverage the talent and brain power and think tank that is a state workforce board and talk more broadly about what we in Oregon have sort of termed and branded the entire workforce system, which for all intents and purposes, basically simplified, brings in K-12 into the conversation and brings in universities to the conversation that already exists at the table, and then other partners, and really thinks about the workforce system as a more holistic, comprehensive system. So we, as a state board, we adopted this. I think it was published in 2016, if memory serves correct, and it was adopted by the state board back in 2017-ish. Hats off to Ken Madden. I think he was involved in some of those early conversations as one of the business people on the executive committee of National Governors Association and the best practice division on workforce and economic opportunity. So with that, I'll toss it back your way, Venkat.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd or Aaliyah? I think this serves nicely to the next section. So thank you for sharing that, Todd and Alia. So just to recap from last board's meeting in December, when Sherry resigned, and then later on I took over as chair, but it's I do so with some trepidation and some skepticism, but these are incredibly hard shoes to fill particularly from the leadership that we had from Ken and Anne and Sherry. So I sent a small letter out over the holidays and just wanted to announce that Skip Newberry will be stepping into the role as vice chair. I'm not sure if he's at the meeting, but I believe that his experience just at the intersection of industry and innovation and economic development will be a huge boost to us. And we want to deepen our engagement with Oregon's employers. Having said that, the three initiatives that I wanted to propose that I'd written briefly in the letter, and I'm going to share a document that I had reviewed with Sarah and Julia and Todd in a meeting. But the three initiatives were, one, we wanted to unify our fragmented workforce reporting so that the governor has one clear picture of talent pipeline alignment with economic priorities. The second one was how do we bridge the gaps between the academic training that we offer in our state and what employers actually need. And then the third part was how do we create legislative pathways because we, as a board, we make some recommendations, but those recommendations aren't really useful unless they become policy. And so we want some legislative partners on our board. So those are the three initiatives. And with that, I'm going to share a document with you. And I'll quickly go over that, but I would love to get some feedback and some thoughts. So give me a moment. Okay. Hopefully you can all see this document. Right. So the overall strategic context here, I'm going to touch a little bit on the prosperity roadmap. So we're identifying some pillars for economic competitiveness. One is talent availability, regulatory certainty, and then taxation. But where the WTDB can play a role is really on the talent availability and the development side. And so today there isn't a single entity that coordinates workforce development. And so I always feel that workforce development is economic development. And so what I wanted to propose was three initiatives aligned with that. The first one was to reposition our board as the unified workforce convener. So we're already legally mandated to do that. And some of the partnerships that we need will be the Future Ready Oregon Industry Consortia or local workforce boards, and then calling out WorkSource Oregon and state agencies. So one thing that helps us in this regard is that there's been an organizational change at the HEC where Future Ready, the consortia also report into Julia. So with that and the WTDB, we can get greater alignment among these partners. And so what I'd like to do is to unify the alignment between these boards so that we have a single set of recommendations from the WTDB to the governor's office. So the Prosperity Council that Andrew brought up that I briefly addressed before getting into this agenda item was that the council has been tasked, the council has been tasked with coming up with a report in 6 months. But right now it's unclear what their workforce development strategy is. However, we were promised that there would be one and that the board would be involved. So I'm looking forward to understanding what that partnership looks like with the Prosperity Council. And I want to be upfront and share what we are doing as a board with the Prosperity Council as well, so that we can at least extend an olive branch and see what kind of engagement we get. And so what I've tried to position each one of these initiatives as a what and a why and a how. And so these are some thoughts at the moment. The what and the why was what I focused on in our meeting with Sarah. But the how is something that is still in progress, and I'm happy to get some feedback on these initiatives from the board members to try and refine them. One comment from Sarah was to include Business Oregon. So I've included that in the agreements or the agencies that we partner with. I was planning to focus first on the priority sectors because we already have technology, manufacturing, and healthcare identified by Future Ready Oregon. And so Sarah wanted to make sure Business Oregon is included. So Todd and I met with Business Oregon, and I think her response was that she would send out a list of target of priority sectors from Business Oregon's perspective. So we'll include that with the industry consortia. The second one was talent pipeline alignment by industry demand. And so this is where I feel like there's a gap here because there are some areas where we do this really well. For example, the Semiconductor Council, where we identified how many candidates we're producing, which is the supply side of the equation, and then what the demands are from the semiconductor industry in terms of number of job openings. And so we can clearly identify a gap and then work on suggestions and recommendations to fix that gap or to close that gap. And this is what I think would really be helpful as we look at various industry sectors that we prioritize, and we get more real-time data without the lag because we have so many industry representatives on the board. So they know what the in-demand skills are for the industries that they represent. So I'd like to fold in that data as well. And what I'd like to do is for us to produce a report. The timeline is still TBD, but we would like to produce a talent pipeline report that shows the alignment between the supply and demand, what our assessment is for workforce readiness, and then get all our recommendations in terms of how we need to modify our training for curriculums or deploy any new pilots or new pathways or policy changes. And so we have the latest data that we can curate and then provide something useful to the governor's office. And then lastly, we are also mandated to have 4 legislators, 1 per chamber and 1 per party. And today we don't have that representation on the board. And this is primarily because the excellent recommendations that we come up with, even in the Workforce Readiness Committee report, we want that to become policy and we want legislative champions on our side. So over the holidays, I went and met with Senator Solomon. She represents my district here where I live. And she's agreed to serve on the board. So Todd and I have reached out, and I think there is a process that she and her office have to go through to apply on Workday or whatever. So she did recommend a few other names too, and we've sent those names to Sarah Means to get her feedback. But I would like to see some legislators for us to complete this legislative membership on the board. And the main reason, again, is so that we have partners who understand our recommendations and they can take that back to the committees that they represent, and they can create a coalition within the legislature that thinks about workforce and economic development integration. So those were the three initiatives that I came up with. And I'd love to get some feedback and discussions on what, if anything, here should change, and if we're going about it the right way. So with that, I'll stop sharing and open it up for discussion.
Cap.
Okay, hey, Anne, go ahead.
Do you have a sense from Sarah or others that there is hearty support and agreement on the convening role of this, really kind of elevating the convening role of this group post our last December meeting, kind of where what we talked about, like in terms of needing more I guess support's probably the best word I can think of. But did you get a sense that she's like, yeah, that's right, we're going to do this, and like we're going to have a lot of support versus us saying we want this, but then, having a hard time getting it to actually happen?
So, and I'm to be honest, this was my first meeting with Sarah, and so
Okay.
I felt like she was fairly open,
Oh,
and
good.
also mentioned that she agreed that these are things that the board should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
So I didn't see any pushback from her. Now,
Awesome.
I know Todd and Julia were also at that meeting, so if I misspoke, then, or if you have anything else to add.
Thanks, Anne, for the question. And Venkat, I think your response was pretty much spot on. I would just add that she seemed very collaborative. I know Sarah from years ago, and when our work brushed up against each other's when she was in economic development, and I found her to be very collaborative, solutions oriented, and a good partner. So, and I anticipate that to be what we experience going forward.
That's
I don't know
awesome.
if Julia had any other thing to. Oh, she said nothing. Okay.
She said no. Adrian?
I wonder if, as you were going through the report, one of the pieces the initiatives you called out were K-12 and higher education institutions. And I think it would be good to, you mentioned coordinated efforts like Future Ready and the consortiums. It would also, just because community colleges are a key connector in terms of workforce development and training, it would be helpful to call out coordinated efforts or some sort of alignment with the OCCA, the Oregon Community College Association. And I'd love to connect you to, I think it would also be of value to connect you, Venkat, as chair, to the executive director of the OCCA, Abby Lee, and I'd be happy to do that. But I'd hope that we can call out the OCCA in there because they're representative of the 17 community colleges. And when you think of community colleges and workforce, there's a direct opportunity and sync with that.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. I took a note and I will add that to the document. Ken?
Yeah, just building on Dr. Benning's comment about alignment, I think from a legislative request, I know there is a workforce committee, and we should really approach them because it seems silly to have a workforce committee that is part of the legislative branch and not be connected to the workforce board of the state of Oregon. So I think that outreach should go out to that board. And I know we have to have both a Republican and a Democrat from the House, and the same goes for the Senate. And so, that's where it's always got touchy before when I was chair. And maybe they can make recommendations to fill those positions because we want active members. And it seems like the party that's out of power is the one that we have the hardest time grabbing and getting a hold of. So I think that would be one of my recommendations. The other one, I fortunately attended a funeral for a friend of the workforce board a long time ago, and she is very active with Oregon business and industry, and I thought that's a great group because that was also some of the members are tapped for the Prosperity Task Force. And I think they also have an education and a workforce committee that they orchestrate. And I just think it would be good for OBI, maybe have a membership or have somebody from OBI serve on our board as well. I did see that John Tabagna is taking the place of Duncan Wise, which I thought was a really good selection. And I know Duncan was always active with OBI as well. So hopefully John has that same connection.
Okay, so Ken, the OBI edition is well taken. Do you have representatives or senators on the Republican side that you recommend that we reach out to? So the names that we got were Mike McLean, Todd, and who else? Do you remember? But happy to take your recommendations, Ken, and then we can.
Yeah, I don't. I can look for it, Venkat. The other thing, since I've got the floor for a second here, that came to mind was, I know Andrew, you've got a lot of experience in your previous role and likely some more sort of emerging in your role now. Maybe you have some recommendations and relationships. I'm not sure, but it just came to mind. Thanks, Venkat.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how the bylaws. I know it's stated that had to have one from each party, but I almost think if you're not going to get it from one party, then you should go to the other one. It should, if two Democrats are willing to serve, then have two Democrats. I know we're limited by the bylaws to having four. That might get the other party to seek a, being active when they realize that they'll lose a voice on our board if they don't fill it.
And just as a reminder, Venkat, we do have Rep. Pham, so that would do exactly that, Ken.
Okay, so we have Solomon and Pham from the D side, so we need two from the R. Okay, and then Ken, just another follow-up was there was Representative Graber, who is on a workforce development committee in the legislature. And so her office reached out asking for just some ideas about our board and workforce development, and they had a whole questionnaire.
I think that'd be fantastic, because that way we're not, I think that alignment issue that Dr. Benning talked about earlier, and I think you've also addressed that in your talk to us as well. I think that alignment is critical. So having somebody that from the workforce committee, from the legislative side, can bring their, the process that they're working on in alignment to what we're trying to accomplish as well. So I just think that connection would be ideal. So
okay, and we'll send out the document post this meeting, but I'm just sharing a link here on the chat as well, so if anybody wants to access it as we're taking comments. Andrew.
Thanks. Just to add to the legislative committee point, so Representative Graber, Chair Graber's committee just got workforce development specifically added to it. And I know she and her office are doing a lot of outreach right now to try to gain information and figure out exactly what that means, and looking towards building a 2027, legislative agenda around workforce development. So the time's pretty good right now to engage with that committee with her. She's two co-vice chairs, one Democrat, one Republican, and a whole committee of people who are going to be interested in this topic.
Okay.
Yeah, I also I like the fact of including OBI, just from the standpoint is that when you start talking about prosperity for the state and bringing new businesses into the state, I know as a business owner I have multiple clients. If you always look at external or new clients and always going after that, you forget about the current existing clients and how important they are. So you have to foster that relationship. And I think I don't want to see this prosperity task force lose focus of the employers that are already existing in this state that are struggling to survive and grow, and pay attention to their voice just as well as they are to the other businesses that are trying to attract into the state of Oregon. So I think OBI can bring that perspective in. And we have other business members. I'm not disparaging the members that are currently on the board, but I think OBI carries a certain amount of weight for the state as well.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Todd?
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Venkat. A couple of things that come to mind. I just wanted to underscore the fact that Charlie Hopewell, whom you heard from in the Workforce Readiness, earlier in this meeting about the Workforce Readiness Committee, he has spent a fair amount of time separately and with me in tandem, talking with OBI around the Workforce Readiness Report and improved engagement, Ken, with them and the WTDB. So I think he's kind of set it up pretty nicely, building relationships with Angela Wilhelm and other staffers over there. So we can circle back around on that one if you'd like, Venkat. The other thing is, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Skip, but I know that you have a fair amount of connections and relationships with the legislature. And I think Venkat and I floated some info to you. I'm wondering if you have any recommendations in terms of ours that would make sense to reach out to for potential additions to the WTDB so that we're in compliance with what our bylaws and statutes call out, or suggestions on how to maybe go about that. I've tried, Julia's tried, Venkat's tried. We've never really stumbled up against this historically, so would love any, advice you can give. Thanks, Skip.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that there's definitely some folks I think that I've shared over email that would be, interesting to consider. And it's obviously we want to be able to make this an attractive opportunity, I think, for members of the legislature. And I had a conversation today with some folks involved in the Prosperity Council, and I think there's an interest in that group in kind of aligning better with workforce is one of the key pillars that group will, kind of be focusing on. And part of it's kind of like I think a structural need where it's like, how do we as a state operate as one unit when it comes to aligning workforce related work with economic development goals and outcomes? And hopefully that alignment can occur both through our work at the WTDB as well as regular open channels of communication with shorter term initiatives that'll have recommendations at the end, such as the Prosperity Council. And it might be interesting to see if we can somehow frame it to legislators in a way where, yes, it's workforce, but it's workforce plus. Like there's a goal here around how do we better align economic development outcomes with workforce. And we may be able to get some interest from folks who may be saying that, well, is workforce alone enough without taking a more holistic view? I don't know, those are just some thoughts in terms of how we kind of find the right folks to get excited about joining from the legislature. I have a meeting on Monday with my lobbyist as well, and this is part of the agenda, is to check in on this topic itself.
Thank you, Skip. That'll be helpful. Any other comments, thoughts, questions on our strategy?
A quick question. Oh,
Sorry,
Ken,
sorry,
a
Dr.
quick question.
Collision detection.
Well,
So,
I know
in
Venkat, you
the-
shared the document. Can we, how much time do you want our feedback? Because I'm wondering too, in your document, if we can go in and add comments and additional questions as we have time to process the information.
Yeah, sure. I would think anytime before our next board meeting. I'm out for a month anyway, so I won't be able to incorporate a lot of feedback. But before the next board meeting and in March would be nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ken.
My comments were just going to tell you how much I appreciate you taking the initiative to write the letter, put your thoughts down, and giving such a clear mission and direction for this board. I think it's critical, and I think your apprehension is shared with a lot of other board members as well. But I do know when this board is functioning in a clear path that we can accomplish a lot of stuff. And I really do appreciate you putting this all together and taking the initiative to meet with Sarah and also get our input as we go along. But I think that needed to be said. So thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you for your guidance and encouragement always, Ken. Todd?
Yeah, to Adrian's question, it also occurred to me, Adrian, well, before I say that, maybe I should say thank you. Adrian and I had a great conversation and debrief after the December 13th meeting and talked about a number of things headed into 2026 and sort of landed on a recommendation that Skip and Venkat embraced, which was to have a retreat for the WTDB. And Adrian has graciously accepted to the invitation to host that meeting, which is on March 6th. I forget the time we landed on, but that's the Friday before the next WTDB meeting. So it might be good to consider, Venkat, getting the comments back for that retreat, because I think much of what you've outlined in those three initiatives will provide fodder for substantive discussions at the retreat and other topics as well.
Makes sense. Thank you, Todd. Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you all for your feedback. And so my takeaways for now are I'm going to add the community college associations. I'm going to add OBI. Wait to hear about some legislative partners and get some feedback from Adrian and others on this committee in the document itself. And you can put them as comments because this is a Google Doc and it should be in suggestions mode. So anything you try to edit should just show up as a suggestion. And then we'll incorporate that before the retreat. So thank you for that. And now we'll move on to our last agenda item, which is Julia on WIOA and workforce spell. Is Julia on?
Thank you, Venkat. As
Hey, Julia.
I don't remember if Venkat or Todd said this earlier, but this is the presentation I was supposed to give at the last full board meeting, but technology prevented me from doing so. Just in case any of you don't know me, I'm Julia Pontoni. I'm the director of the Office of Workforce Investments at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. My office supports the Workforce and Talent Development Board. Next slide, Aaliyah. So first, I'm going to start by talking about WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act core performance for program year 2024. So as you'll recall, back in May of last year, the governor sent a letter to the Workforce and Talent Development Board asking that you work with state agencies responsible for the core WIOA programs to identify a set of performance metrics for the public workforce system for WorkSource Oregon. The state agencies worked on a memo with recommendations for those core performance metrics, which included the WIOA core performance metrics, shared that with the WTDB, and then sent that along to the governor's office. Now we're at the point where agencies are working to try to figure out how we can get some of the reporting on the metrics that went above and beyond the standard WIOA core performance metrics. But in the meantime, we wanted to provide you all with data on what we do have right now. So just a quick refresher on the WIOA core programs. Title I is career and training services for youths, adults, and dislocated workers. Title II is adult basic skills, so English as a second language, basic skills that help folks be able to enter training for workforce development. Both of those programs are overseen by the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. Title I-B programs are in my office, and Title II are in a different office. You heard from Donna Llewellyn, I think at your last executive committee meeting about Title II performance. And then Title III is called Wagner-Pizer, and that's what the Employment Department runs through WorkSource Oregon centers. It's employment services, it's job matching, it's getting folks into jobs and making sure employers can find folks to fill their vacancies. And then Title IV is vocational rehabilitation, and that is run by the Department of Human Services and the Oregon Commission for the Blind. Next slide, Aaliyah. The core performance metrics for WIOA are employment rate second quarter after exiting the program. So is a participant employed in the second quarter after they exit? Employment rate the fourth quarter after they exit a program? Median earnings in the second quarter after they've completed the program? Measurable skill gains in the program, credential attainment rate in the program, and newly effectiveness in serving employers. Next slide, Aaliyah. So now we can get into the actual data for program year 2024, which is July 2024 through June 2025. This is how many participants were served in the core WIOA programs. You can see it's about 150,000 participants for the year. I will say there's some overlap likely in participants. For example, often somebody could be enrolled in both the Title I adult and dislocated worker program. So they might be being counted twice here. That's just the way that our data works right now. Percentage wise, you can see that OED's programs, employment services, make up the vast majority of the folks that we serve. Again, that's like somebody coming into a WorkSource Oregon Center saying, I'm looking for a job in this field, and having somebody help them find a job and match with an employer. Next slide. I'm running through these kind of fast, but I will, of course, answer any questions at the end. So employment rate second quarter after exiting one of these programs. This chart compares the actual rate for the programs compared to the target rate. So every year we negotiate with the U.S. Department of Labor to set our performance targets. So the employment rates that we're supposed to achieve statewide for each of the different programs. You can see largely we met or came close to our target employment rates. There are a few misses. You heard some information from Donna Llewellyn last time about Title II in particular, but largely we met or came close to the employment rate. Next slide. Employment rate fourth quarter. We did about the same here, largely met, exceeded, or got really close to the employment rate compared to our target. Next slide. Median earnings. So this again is the median earnings for participants 2 quarters after they exited a program. You can see we exceeded the target rate for every single program. That's pretty exciting. Some of the programs like Title II way exceeded their target rate. Title III way exceeded its target. So that was some pretty good news. Next slide. Credential attainment rate. So this is the percent of participants who are enrolled in an education or training program as part of their participation who attained a recognized post-secondary or secondary credential. So that could be a GED during or within 1 year after the program exit. You'll notice Title III OED's employment services isn't on here because their dollars don't fund training, only Titles I, II, and IV fund training. Mostly we exceeded or were very close to meeting our target rate. And last slide is measurable skill gains. And this is the percent of program participants who are in an education and training program that leads to a post-secondary credential that made some progress in achieving a measurable skill gain. So made some progress towards an academic, technical, occupational, or other credential. So they might not have completed it, but they made documented progress towards completing that credential. And again, most of the programs exceeded the target rate, and those that didn't were pretty darn close. So that was pretty fast, but I'm happy to take any questions. I'm really curious about like which of these metrics are most valuable to you. We can disaggregate these by, sex, race, ethnicity, in some cases, geographic location, but I'm curious what would be helpful for you all for the WTDB in the future for either digging into some of these a little bit more, disaggregating them a little bit more, or if there are metrics in here that you have questions about or you aren't sure are super important for the WTDB to track. I'd love to hear about that.
Thank you, Julia. So for my education, these metrics that we report on, where do they get reported and how do they get reported? Do they get reported to the Department of Labor?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And the data gathering that we're doing for this, what is the source of the data? Does that come from the employment department?
It comes from each of the departments that manage the different titles. So like employment collects data for their program, HEC through the local boards, through their providers, collect and report data for career and training services for youth, adults, and dislocated workers. So it's by the different programs.
Okay. And do you know how this data is used by the Department of Labor? Does that affect future funding or what happens?
So it doesn't affect future funding, but if we miss performance targets by a certain amount, there are steps that they can take. For example, increasing technical assistance, requiring a corrective action plan. Generally, I have exactly what the steps are in one of my notes. Let me just get here. So they look at if the overall state program score falls below 90% of us for 90% for that single core program, or the overall state indicator score falls below 90% for a single measure. So they're looking, if we didn't achieve 90% of the performance target, then they will take another step. Usually that first step, again, is like more technical assistance. But if we miss it by 90% a couple years in a row, they could implement sanctions against the state and cut our funding, withhold funding.
And then finally, I wanted to ask you, you were asking what would be useful to disaggregate by. Is it possible to disaggregate by sectors like industry, or is that not possible to do?
We can for at least some of the programs right now. But I think we can for all of the programs, actually. Okay. It's not as easily available, but we should be able to do that.
Okay. And so the reason I asked was, since we're in the process of defining all these priority sectors, right? I mean, including Future Ready and anything else that Business Oregon or OPI comes up with, that might be useful for us to understand or dig deeper into. So
absolutely.
Thank you for that. Any questions for Julia? Okay, Todd, you wanted to talk a little bit about the metrics task force that that is in our strategic plan that you wanted to stand up. What is this the right place to have that conversation, or should we?
Sure, I can just offer a bit of a reminder. In our strategic plan, we have the third page, which calls out, I think it's 18 different board metrics, one of which is to stand up a metrics task force. And the original intention and thinking behind that you all had, because that strategic plan was developed with the help of the executive committee of the WTDB, was to take these good metrics that Julia just talked about and hold them into that metrics task force and consider other metrics that the board wanted to watch and include in regular reporting to better understand how things are working across the broader system. So that has sort of yet to be stood up. Some of the things that have been mentioned in previous conversations is that could be stood up and that work could be carried out over the process of maybe 6 months, and then recommendation come back to the state workforce board at a meeting for a vote to approve. Other suggestions were to sort of fold that work into the WTDB continuous improvement subcommittee as it sort of fits there, and a few others, but I think those are sort of the two main sort of strategies and comments, themes, I guess, that people have shared with me, Venkat. So we do have that called out over the period of 25-26. Not to say that we couldn't amend, because we have agreed in past meetings that the WTB strategic plan, and I think in large part this was caused because of COVID, and also costs involving producing strategic plans every 2 years, that we could revise it, update it as needs dictate. So just wanted to flag that for folks. Yeah, I think that unless folks have questions, look for Venkat and I to loop back with some more information around that metrics task force soon.
And so, Todd, I think the metrics task force would be tasked with coming up with metrics, coming up with what the metrics should be and how they should be measured. Is that right? Or does the board, can we as a board make some recommendations of what we want those metrics to be?
Yes.
Okay.
I think on both accounts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So because I was just thinking back to the initiatives that we put forward, and I think that second one, which is a talent pipeline by industry demand, I would love to see some metrics around that based on each priority sector that we identify. And maybe, we could fold in the industry consortia in this, and they come up, each consortia comes up with one or two top metrics that can be folded into the metrics task force. So just some thoughts I'm thinking off the top of my head here.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think those are definitely worth exploring. I think the original intention, if I remember back to Lindsay Wellesley when she was, leading and facilitating the efforts around the strategic plan and sort of where we landed on that was that it was a call out for further exploration around the possibilities of other metrics across that, again, sort of harkening back to the high performing workforce board that might make sense for you as board members to sort of track things and better understand other reporting metrics. And maybe some of those could come from what HEC is tracking in terms of post-secondary metrics. Maybe some of those could come from maybe priorities that exist and are being tracked over at the employment department, over at Department of Human Services, those that resonate with the business community, Business Oregon. I think it definitely warrants further conversations and thought partnering. I think the other thing we want to guard against, I think you and I chatted about this, Venkat, and maybe Skip too, is when we sort of settle on some, I don't think we want it to get too large because it will dilute. I think these are just my thoughts. It could potentially, I guess, dilute the value of the metrics if we try to sort of track and follow too many of them. So I think that age-old thing about prioritizing, being super intentional and focused on what those are that we want to, sort of track, monitor, follow over time is really important.
Yeah, agreed. And Andrew, just a quick FYI, Gail sends these employment reports out, and so I'd followed up with her on some questions, and there's some very insightful data and charts that she had shared with us. So as we identify these priority sectors, and then we keep an eye on declines, for example, the manufacturing decline that she had pointed out, I think we have some opportunity here to analyze the data a little bit deeper and provide recommendations based on those. So, okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I'll defer to Julia. It looks like she just raised her hand there.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd. Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I have another presentation to provide on Workforce Pell.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll hold my question for later. Yeah.
Oh, Todd, if it was around the same topic, we can. No. Okay. Okay. So, Workforce Pell, Aaliyah, next slide. Before I talk about Workforce Pell, I want to just provide a little refresher or introduction to the regular Pell Grant program. Pell Grants are federal grants that help students offset the cost of higher education. Like the Oregon Opportunity Grant, Pell Grants don't need to be repaid. To be eligible for a Pell Grant, a student needs to have exceptional financial need. They need to have not already earned a bachelor's, graduate, or professional degree. They need to have earned a high school diploma, GED, or the equivalent, and be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. And Pell Grants can only be used at accredited higher education institutions for largely undergraduate degree programs, with a few exceptions, and credit-bearing certificate programs that are longer than 600 clock hours and delivered over at least 15 weeks. So that's the regular Pell Grant program. Workforce Pell is a new program that was established as part of HR1, the big budget bill that Congress passed last year. It expands the Pell Grant program to provide workforce Pell Grants to Pell eligible learners who are enrolling in short-term workforce training programs. The award is prorated based on program length. And that award amount does count to a learner's overall Pell Award maximum amount. This slide outlines the program eligibility for Workforce Pell, so which programs learners can use Workforce Pell Grants for. First, the program needs to be aligned with the job requirements of high skill, high wage, high or in-demand industry sectors or occupations. The program needs to meet the hiring requirements of employers in those sectors or of those occupations. It needs to lead to an industry recognized credential that is stackable and portable. So stackable in this case means that it can be used towards an additional credential. So once you've completed this program, you can take that credit and use it towards an additional education program. And portable means that it is recognized by more than one employer. So it's not specifically for Intel, for example. It can be used by a variety of different employers or accepted by a variety of different employers. Let's see. It is the governor's responsibility. Oh, I'll stop here. Josh?
So does it have to meet all 4 of these bullets or just any one of these?
It has to meet all 4 of those bullets. But I'm glad you paused me because there is one exception to the stackable requirement if the occupation for which it prepares learners for, if the credential is the only credential that is needed for that occupation. For example, one I might throw out there is a commercial truck driver's license for the trucking industry, where there isn't really another credential that somebody would need for that occupation. Then it doesn't have to be stackable to an additional credential. But yes, Josh, it has to meet all of these requirements and the below ones. But first, these first 4 requirements are the responsibility in statute are the responsibility of the governor to define and to determine whether programs meet these eligibility criteria in consultation with the state workforce board. So the WTDB has a big role to play here. The first step is defining what we mean by high skill, high wage, or in-demand industry sectors and occupations. Now, the Employment Department already has a definition for these terms, but the WTDB has raised many times over the past several years questions about those definitions. High skill or high wage, for example, is anything above the median wage, which maybe isn't actually high wage. And then I think the same thing is true for high demand or in-demand industry, is anything with more than the average projected job openings. So I think there might be a desire for the WTDB to look at those definitions. That will happen as part of the talent assessment that's kicked off. Our contractor, Echo Northwest, will be working with the Talent Assessment Steering Committee and getting feedback from the full board, of course, around these definitions to recommend definitions for high skill, high wage, or in-demand industries and sectors to the governor's office. And then the WTDB will also need to make recommendations about how we know if the credential meets the hiring requirements of employers, if it leads to an industry recognized credential, if it is stackable and portable. Those are all things that the WTDB will have a role in advising the governor on. In addition, to be eligible for students to use workforce Pell Grants in the program must be offered by a Title IV eligible institution. So again, that means an accredited institution of higher education. It must be greater than or equal to 150 clock hours, but less than 600 clock hours. And it must span at least 8 weeks, but cannot exceed 15 weeks in length. It must have been already offered for at least a year. It must have a completion rate that's at least 70% within 150% of the normal completion time. It must have a job placement rate of at least 70% measured 100 days after a student completes the program. And the cost of the program has to be less than or equal to the value added earnings that a typical completer will earn after exiting the program. That value added earnings is earnings above the poverty line. So anything a completer earns above the poverty line has to be greater than the program cost. So I think Dr. Bennings can share that very few programs right now currently meet these eligibility criteria. Even just getting past the clock hour and week requirements is difficult, particularly in Oregon, which is not semester-based. This was really set up for semester-based states, so it's an added challenge for Oregon. But then when you add in the completion rate, the job placement rate, the program cost to value added earnings, it's a tall order. So I know community colleges are hard at work assessing what programs currently might fit in these buckets, what programs could be tweaked, whether that means lengthened or shortened to better fit with workforce Pell. But there's a lot to be done to actually develop or alter programs so that they can be eligible. But again, the WTDB has a big role to play in defining these first set of eligibility criteria around being aligned with industry needs. Next slide, Aaliyah. So what are HEC staff doing? I've convened a cross-sector or a cross-office group of staff to work on implementation within the HEC. We have done a preliminary review of existing community college programs, really just looking at the program length. And I provided an orientation briefing to the Higher Education Coordinating Commission back in December. I was supposed to do that at the WTDB meeting, but now I'm doing it here. We've kicked off the talent assessment, which again will be the big process that helps define some of these eligibility criteria. The goal is to have the recommended definitions of high wage, high demand, high skill approved by the WTDB at the March meeting. And then for the governor to adopt or decide to delay adoption and kind of go back and say, hey, we need to look at this a little bit more of those definitions in the next quarter. The program technically goes into effect July 1st. Whether or not states will be ready and have an approval process up and running and have all these eligibility criteria determined by then is still up in the air. The Federal Department of Education is also still in their rulemaking process for this program. They completed a negotiated rulemaking committee process back in December and will soon publish the draft final rules. And then there will be a 30-day public comment period, and then they have to synthesize those comments and then finalize the rules. So they still have a lot of work to do before the program goes into effect on July 1st. And that means that, states can't fully implement or even start implementing before we know what those rules might say about these eligibility criteria. So while the program technically goes into effect July 1st, I wouldn't expect that students will start using this program at that point. It will probably take a little bit longer than that. Lee, I think we can skip the next slides in the interest of time. And it's just sort of an overview of right now, what are the top 15 high wage, high demand occupations that require some post-secondary education, but less than a degree. And you can look at those offline. But I'd love to answer any questions you all have about this.
Any questions for Julia? Thank you, Julia. I think one part of it, certainly the industry demand and the high wage, high skill, that aligns so well with our initiative anyway that we're proposing. So
exactly, yep.
Looking forward to being able to weigh into those. So thank you for that. I see Josh has his hand raised.
Thanks, Venkat. Julia, is the plan to send the definitions out to the group before the March meeting so we can review them, or are we going to get them at the March meeting and then have to vote?
No, we will certainly send them out beforehand. And if for some reason that's not possible, we will provide time to digest, ask questions before vote. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's in the March meeting is a goal. There's no set deadline that we have to have this done by. It's just the sooner we can get it done, the sooner we can start approving programs, the sooner learners can start using the Pell Grants. All right.
Any other questions? Thank you, Julia. Okay. Any other business that we need to do today? Anything on any topic that people want to bring up?
Hey, Venkat. As you might recall, at the last executive committee meeting, which was in November, Jennifer Rice here at the Office of Workforce Investments came in and presented on the strategic innovation grants that the WTDB funds. Currently, after budget reductions, we're at about 700,000. And Jen talked about a number of different things that we were thinking in terms of the next round of strategic innovation grants. She captured some comments from folks, including Sherry, done in her previous role, and others. And since we got a little bit of time, I just see that she's on here. I don't mean to put her on the spot, but I thought that she might have some additional or different questions given leadership change, the prosperity roadmap that was announced by the governor, right? The landscape has changed a little bit. So I just wanted to give her the opportunity, if she wanted to ask a few questions, make a few comments. Jen, is that okay with you? Venkat, okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, hey, everybody. This is my second time kind of sharing this information, but in a little bit of a different lens. So in thinking about priorities for the strategic innovation grants, I'm curious if you're thinking, I've heard a lot of conversation about sectors and sector specific topics, and y'all could make the strategic innovation grants of something that's focused on specific sectors, and maybe those are investments in the industry consortia area. So maybe it's tech and manufacturing and healthcare, or maybe it's the governor's priorities, which are early childhood education, behavioral health, or housing production. Also, alternatively, with the conversation that was just had, maybe it's high wage, high skill, high demand. I've just popped into the chat the enormous spreadsheet from OED on high wage, high skill, high demand occupations. And maybe there's some of that y'all could look into and figure out if there are specific industries that you'd like to see investment in. You know, we could make the priority of AI in workforce, something like that. The intention of the grant really is for innovation and pilot projects and new and kind of new and shiny ideas for workforce. And so really the direction, it would be great to get some feedback from y'all about what you're thinking about that direction so that I can get this process underway with our procurement. Because we all know sometimes things take time. So having some of these things identified now would be excessively helpful as I'm going through this procurement process. So I'm going to open it up to y'all to share some opinions, and I'll gather those and send a little synthesized email over to Todd to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we'd like to prioritize.
Thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. One question is, when do you need feedback by? What is the timeline on these grants?
Well, they're every biennium, and we are now 6 months into this biennium, so it would be quite nice to get these done ASAP. I don't know that I particularly have a deadline, but definitely before the next meeting, if possible.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts, comments, questions for Jennifer? So we'll take a look at that, Jennifer. Aliyah, would you mind sending that out with the minutes, please, so that board members have a chance to review it and offer any thoughts and comments, and we can discuss
One
that
thing,
yeah, go ahead.
One thing you might consider too is that the workforce readiness grants within Future Ready are ending, and it is possible to look at what best practices have occurred, what investments they feel were like really paid off, and then making further investments into those programs that we know have proven success. So that's also a different approach that could be taken. I'm trying to give y'all some food for thought so that you can kind of analyze this and give me a little bit more direction.
Makes sense. Yeah, my very quick gut reaction is to focus on things that are strategic and innovative, right? Just because that's what the grants represent. But we'll give it some thought and get back to you. So thank you for sharing it. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
There's a couple of options in terms of a deadline that popped into my brain. Unfortunately, the next executive committee meeting, you'd be out. So Skip would have to stand in for you. And that is on February 18th. That gives you not quite a month, but close to a month, which is quite a bit of time to sort of talk amongst yourselves, talk with others, maybe check in with if you're on one of the Future Ready consortia, to talk with those folks to sort of strategize, thought partner, and then come back and talk about it on the 18th. Conversely, if I see Jen shaking her head, I know that she really wants to get this going because we are a little bit behind here. We could give people maybe 2 weeks, to tackle that. Whatever you'd like to do, Venkat. I guess the third option would be to kick it all the way to the 6th of March, but that seems a little bit late based on me reading the tea leaves and Jen's nonverbals. So just food for thought.
Yeah. My recommendation would be to send this to the board members to get some feedback, give them a timeline, and then also send it to the consortia leads for Future Ready and see what they might have to say. They might have some ideas. And then try to fold that all in a timeline that works for Jennifer.
Great. So Jennifer and I will talk amongst ourselves and we'll figure this out and follow up with you in terms of what we find out.
Yeah. And unless other board members feel differently, I think that seems to be a reasonable recommendation for now. Okay. Anything else we should discuss before ending the meeting? You can give everybody 7 minutes back. So thank you all for attending and thank you for taking 2 hours out of your day to make this happen.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Thanks, Venkat.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Venkat.